Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. The moments in the history of Apollo 11 were a turning point, not only for humanity, but for the entire universe. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin carried the pride of being the first humans to set foot on the moon, while astronaut Michael Carter was embarking on a unique discovery of his own on the lunar surface. Slowly, carefully, he took his steps. Everything was in order, and the moon's gray, cold surface stretched out with him toward infinity. However, this was not a mission that was going as planned. Michael, while wandering the surface for about an hour, noticed a faint parasitic sound coming from the module. He immediately turned up the volume on his headset, but the sound was still there, a strange hum interrupted by crackling bursts. At first he thought it was a normal glitch in Apollo 11's communication system. However, after a few minutes he realized that the sound was getting stronger and more distinct. This was much more than just a communication error. Michael tried to clarify the sound in his headphones. His mind raced, searching for a logical explanation for this unusual noise, but the structure of the sound was unlike any type of interference he had encountered before. A few seconds later, the signal repeated again. This time, the sound was much louder and repeated at regular intervals. The sound was definitely mechanical in nature, but there seemed to be nothing human-made behind it. At first, he thought it was just a temporary malfunction of one of the communication devices outside the module. But soon, he realized that the sound had a specific rhythm. The doubts that began to form in his mind led him down a different path. This might not be a mistake, it could be a message, but if no one explained it to him, it would silently pass by. He knew there was a great risk in ignoring this, but somehow he couldn't let this signal go unaddressed. Michael immediately decided to report it to Mission Control. But just as he was about to do so, a strange hum rose in his headset. When he needed to speak, communication suddenly cut off completely. The signal from the module weakened and then disappeared. Michael shouted several times, "Apollo 11, this is Carter, do you copy?" But in place of his voice, there was only deep silence. His heart began to race. The complete loss of communication so close to the surface was unsettling. At that moment, he felt he was not alone on the moon. Something was wrong. The strange silence around him felt like another form of sensory madness. It wasn't hard to sense that something was wrong on the moon's flat and silent surface. The excitement he had felt when stepping onto the moon was now replaced with deep fear. Michael quickened his pace and started heading back toward the module. But something inside him told him that this communication failure wasn't just a malfunction. Finally, as he opened the module's hatch and entered, he realized that the other two astronauts, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, were completely unaware of what was going on. They were both focused solely on their own tasks, oblivious to everything happening outside. "Everything okay, Michael?" Buzz asked, checking the systems. Taking a deep breath, Michael replied, "Yeah, everything's fine, but something's off. I picked up a signal. It was really strange. There was an issue with the communication system," he said. But he didn't try to explain just how serious it was, because there was a fear inside him that he wasn't brave enough to share. At that moment, he had to figure out what that signal was. But now, sitting in the module, facing himself, he knew there was nothing to say. Neil nodded. "This kind of stuff always happens. Sometimes there are technical glitches. Let's not waste any more time. We came here to discover something, remember?" he said with a smile. As much as Michael was uneasy, Neil's calmness was equally striking. Buzz and Neil thought everything was fine, but Michael felt deep down that something was different on the moon's surface. After communication was lost, once again Michael tried to establish contact with Earth, but it had become clear that something was wrong. As the hours passed, the strange signal was never heard again, but Michael was certain that this event would leave traces in some way. He had set foot on the moon's silent surface and had witnessed the beginning of something. But what was it? What kind of signal was it? Slowly, Michael wrestled with these questions in his mind as he continued his mission. But something kept whispering to him that the sound was a message that everything would change. After the historic mission of Apollo 11, When the astronauts returned to Earth, they were met with great excitement. However, despite this great success and being a turning point for humanity, something was missing inside Michael Carter. The echoes of the strange experience he had on the moon still haunted his mind. That strange signal continued to disturb him more with each passing day. Looking back, Michael felt that he hadn't realized how important that moment was when it happened. But the sound and the silence that followed were telling him something else. After receiving the official reports from the Apollo 11 astronauts regarding their mission, Mission Control had conducted a highly intense briefing for Michael and the other astronauts. It was made clear that everything had to be reported correctly from every angle, and any mistake would have serious consequences. In particular, the astronauts had been given detailed training on how to respond to questions regarding their experiences on the moon. Answer as expected, or changes will be made to your mission report, one of the mission control officers had said sternly. Michael would never forget that moment. Under the pressure of the watching eyes, a strange feeling grew inside him. Asking about the strange shadow he saw on the moon or the peculiar signal he heard had become almost impossible. He understood that something was being hidden, but until that moment he had to give the impression that everything was normal. Unfortunately, he had no choice but to complete the mission and return to Earth. The things he had experienced on the moon would have to remain a secret, even from himself. However, beneath the honor of being one of the first humans to step onto the moon, Michael constantly felt that something was missing. His unease never seemed to fade. He continued to think that what he had felt on the moon was no accident, and that the strange signal held some sort of meaning. Despite the strict rules outlined by Mission Control, Michael had thousands of questions running through his mind about this event. Why hadn't there been further investigation into the source of that signal? Why had no one questioned it? Why was that strange figure on the moon never reported? These questions made him feel even more unsettled. And then one day, something happened. When Michael was called to a press conference with the other astronauts to make a public statement, he realized how serious the situation had become. At the press conference, for a moment, everything seemed normal. But as the meeting went on, he noticed a sense of unease in his eyes. It became clear that they were only supposed to answer the questions in a very specific way. NASA's top officials had given a series of instructions on how to respond to those questions. "Just say what you know," said an official from the mission. "Don't make any other comments about it." Michael listened carefully to this warning. After all, from that moment on, he began to feel that everything was at risk of disappearing. Investigating the strange events on the moon might mean uncovering a much deeper secret of NASA, but continuing to speak could lead to the end of everything. During the meeting, as the press's questions and attention grew, Michael realized something was missing. Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong were emphasizing how everything had gone smoothly and how the mission had been completed successfully, while Michael seemed almost invisible. Their calmness contradicted the strange feeling Michael was experiencing. The other astronauts claimed that nothing was different, but Michael couldn't fill the void inside him. As his unease grew, after the meeting, Michael decided to find one of NASA's senior officials to ask more questions. He not only wanted to clarify the oddities he had been pondering in his mind, but also the terrifying experiences on the moon that he hadn't shared with anyone. But as all these thoughts occupied his mind, he noticed something. Even though the idea of sharing this felt incredibly difficult, staying silent was causing him to lose the courage he once had. Amplifying this feeling could not only threaten his life but others as well. One evening, as he sat alone writing mission notes, a question echoed constantly in his mind. What was on the moon? Although he couldn't share this question with anyone, Michael still felt that the event was much deeper. But there was something else. Ever since stepping onto the lunar surface, his unease had never faded. There was a doubt, and that doubt soon grew even stronger. Months later, while trying to make sense of the fears and questions he had experienced during the mission, Michael faced a thought that flowed through his mind like a river. This silence wasn't a mistake, a malfunction, or a coincidence. Someone was deliberately hiding something. and Michael understood that someone was fighting to ensure no one would learn this secret. But now, that secret had begun to enter his life in some way. As time passed, the doubts and unease that had built up inside Michael Carter deepened. The Apollo 11 mission and the events that followed had left him with a sense of inner turmoil. As the days passed, Michael tried to forget the secrets of the moon and those terrifying moments, but the emptiness inside him never seemed to fill. He continued to live, trapped between the truths and the questions. However, there was one thing. The strange signal he had heard on the moon and the figure he had seen were not just a dream or an illusion. They were something far greater. Something was being hidden, and NASA knew something about it. Perhaps the lost structures and strange figures on the moon held a secret too deep for humanity to uncover. Michael wanted to investigate these secrets and reveal them one day, but he was always lacking the courage. Years later, in 1987, Michael's life came to an unexpected end. Although the death report stated heart attack, his family, friends, and especially his grandson Ethan Carter believed that his death was not natural. Michael's state of mind in the days leading up to his death made them question what he had experienced in his final moments. Ethan had noticed that his grandfather had been acting stranger than usual. Michael had recently been constantly looking at old photos and some old files. One day, when Ethan entered his grandfather's study, he saw him holding a notebook. That notebook contained a key to the secrets Michael had long been hiding. After his grandfather's death, Ethan found a lost box in the old bookshelf at home. The box was filled with old magazines, newspaper clippings, and some old scientific papers. But something caught Ethan's attention. At the very bottom of the box was a very worn and yellowed notebook. On the cover of the notebook it read, "The Road to the Moon." Ethan's heart raced as he took the notebook and began flipping through its pages. Each page seemed like a journal in which his grandfather, once part of the Apollo 11 team, had written about the strange things he had seen on the moon and the secrets NASA had been hiding. As Ethan read through the notebook, he became horrified. With every word written on the pages, his grandfather was describing the terrifying events he had experienced on the moon and the deep secret behind them. Several pages mentioned a shadowy figure seen on the lunar surface. Michael had taken notes about this entity. The shadow figure was described as appearing suddenly on the moon's dark surface and disappearing just as quickly. According to Michael, this figure had appeared for only a moment and then vanished without a trace. But the most terrifying part was that Michael believed this figure was not just an illusion. It was real. The pages of the notebook also contained information about strange structures on the moon. Michael had written about seeing some sort of ancient ruins on the lunar surface. These structures were intriguing and mysterious. Michael had reported these structures to NASA, but he had received no response. Even more chilling was the fact that NASA had kept all information about these structures hidden. In the notebook, Michael had left a note saying, "These are not man-made. I believe these structures may belong to another civilization." Ethan realized that every word his grandfather had written was filled with fear and tension. This was much more than a simple discovery. It was the greatest secret in human history. However, Michael had not only written about the strange figures and structures on the moon, but also about the pressure NASA had applied on him. He had been under immense pressure to keep what he knew about the moon a secret. As he continued reading the notebook, Ethan found that Michael had described in more detail NASA's and the government's control over the astronauts. After the mission, they were instructed to give the impression that everything was normal. But Michael knew that the events he had experienced on the moon held a far greater meaning. At that time, NASA had tried every possible way to keep these secrets hidden. As Ethan read through the notebook, he began to think that his grandfather might have put his life at risk. He wondered if everything Michael had written could have posed a threat before his death. But Ethan also realized something else. These secrets not only had the potential to affect Michael's life, but could also influence the future of all humanity. Now, Ethan had to find a way to bring the truth his grandfather had left behind to the world. But one question lingered. Why had Michael kept such dangerous information hidden? And what exactly was NASA hiding? Ethan decided to pursue these questions. Now he was one step closer to uncovering the truth behind these secrets, but something gave Ethan an even deeper sense of threat. If his grandfather had revealed these secrets to the world, he might have faced a very different end. Ethan had to gather his courage to uncover the lost truths of his grandfather. As Ethan read the writings in his grandfather's old notebook, he lost track of time. Every page pulled him deeper into a mystery, and every word felt like he was embarking on a journey. Michael Carter's every written word both reopened the fears of the past and made Ethan feel like he was about to uncover an incredible truth about the moon. One day, a passage in Michael's notebook deeply affected Ethan. His grandfather spoke of the shadowy figure he had seen on the moon's surface, but he had written so much more. Michael believed that the strange entity was not just a fantasy, but something actually on the moon's surface. The entity was not merely a shadow figure. Michael thought it was a conscious being, somehow trying to communicate a message to humanity. The most terrifying part was Michael's belief that this being had intentionally been there and moved around at times. The entity would constantly disappear on the dark side of the moon, only to reappear in another location. Michael had noticed that it seemed to act like an observer watching them. Another part of the notebook was even more chilling. Michael wrote that the figure on the moon would sometimes approach them but never touch them, only watch from a distance. A kind of observer, Michael had described, but its eyes look at us differently. It seems to know every move we make, every thought we have. Michael noted that these impressions were constantly felt, and a strange density on the moon's surface seemed to follow him everywhere. As Ethan continued reading his grandfather's notebook, he realized something even more unsettling. Michael had tried to track the shadow figure's traces, but he had failed each time. The figure would constantly vanish, and he could never find the source of the traces. However, on one of the notebook's pages, Michael had written that on the moon, there were strange structures that left traces connected to the figure and something else. Michael described these structures as very old and not man-made. These structures harbored a great mystery on the moon's surface, and instead of investigating them, NASA had preferred to conceal them. Michael believed that these ruins were not just a few centuries old, but traces of a much older and more conscious civilization. These structures on the moon were not only strangely constructed, but they were also out of place with the surrounding terrain. Each time Michael examined them, he was convinced they had been built with a conscious purpose in mind. Something is being hidden, Michael had written, and this mystery contains the greatest secret not only of the moon, but perhaps of all human history. The moment Michael saw these structures, he felt that something was wrong. They bore no resemblance to anything else on the moon and could not have been designed by humans. Ethan was shocked as he read these notes. Michael had seen these structures and figures on the moon, but despite reporting them to NASA, no explanation had ever been given. There was even a note in the notebook about an investigation into why NASA had silently concealed these discoveries. It must remain secret, Michael had written. If I reveal this secret, I could be in danger. Ethan was beginning to understand how real his grandfather's observations were. This could not be an ordinary discovery. Michael had possibly made the greatest discovery in world history. After a week of studying the notebook and the writings, Ethan made a significant decision. This information was no longer just his. It was too important for all of humanity. He wanted to pursue the trail of his grandfather's discoveries and reveal this dark truth. However, something was holding him back. Revealing this secret might not only put him in danger but also his loved ones. As Ethan deepened his research, he reached out to a few former employees from old space agencies. Most preferred to remain silent about past events, but a few mentioned rumors about secret Apollo 11 mission records. Based on the information he learned, Ethan discovered that NASA had hidden a great deal of information during the Apollo 11 mission, and that this information could be connected to conscious entities on the moon and ancient structures. As he pieced together the information, Ethan realized how much NASA had been concealing. One day, Ethan contacted Dr. Richard Hayes, a former NASA scientist. Dr. Hayes initially tried to distance Ethan, but eventually he decided to show him a hidden storage facility related to the moon's structures. Dr. Hayes said that records about the structures Michael had seen were stored in that facility. After reading the writings in his grandfather's notebook, Ethan had become eager to research these structures. Dr. Hayes, sharing this information with him, said, "These might be things humanity was never meant to know." Ethan now aimed to not only understand the truths his grandfather had seen, but also to find a way to reveal them to the world. However, on the other hand, his growing fear of uncovering a secret that could get him into trouble was becoming more intense. As Ethan's research progressed, he saw how everything in Michael's notebook fit together like pieces of a puzzle. On the moon, not only shadowy figures but also traces of conscious beings and ancient structures were present. But this secret had been hidden not just in the notes Michael had written before his death, but throughout the entire Apollo 11 mission. Ethan decided to pursue these secrets. Solving the dark mystery on the moon could be the greatest discovery in history, but it could also mean putting his life in danger. As Ethan delved deeper into the dark secrets of his grandfather's notebook, his fear grew, but so did the fire of curiosity within him. He felt that the truths that had been hidden for years after Michael's death were now right in front of him. However, the process of uncovering this truth was becoming increasingly dangerous. The information hidden in NASA's archives and the notes his grandfather had written were aligning, both pointing to the same conclusion. There were conscious beings and ancient structures on the moon, and this secret had been deliberately concealed. Ethan decided to dig deeper for more information. He wanted to solve the mystery behind Michael's death and follow in his grandfather's footsteps, but he was aware that the road to this secret was fraught with danger. Above all, he realized that acting alone based on the information in the notebook would lead him down a dark path. Nevertheless, during his research, he decided to reach out to former NASA employees. Sometimes he contacted them by phone, other times by email. Some had remained silent for years, forgotten the dark days of the past, but a few decided to finally listen to Ethan and help him. One day, Ethan decided to contact Dr. Richard Hayes, a former NASA scientist who had worked on the Apollo 11 mission and later retired from NASA. Ethan believed Dr. Hayes knew a lot and tried every possible way to reach him. At first, Dr. Hayes tried to push Ethan away, but Ethan's persistence and determination eventually softened Dr. Hayes. A few days later, Dr. Hayes agreed to meet with Ethan and provide some crucial information regarding the notebook his grandfather had written. They arranged to meet in secret. Dr. Hayes told Ethan, "If you decide to learn these things, know that this path will lead you to not only knowledge but also great danger. The search for the truth will not be easy, Ethan. Many people have done everything to keep these secrets hidden, but what your grandfather saw is not a secret, it is a truth. If you want to learn this truth, you must be very careful." Dr. Hayes' advice, while frightening, also gave Ethan courage, because now Ethan was determined to learn the truth. Dr. Hayes spoke of a secret location, NASA's classified archives. In these archives, the most important and censored data from Apollo 11 was stored. Although NASA had made many of Apollo 11's records public, some critical information had been kept hidden. Hayes explained how Ethan could access these secret archives. "These are very dangerous documents," Hayes warned, "but if you truly want to know, I will help you." They spent a week planning, and eventually Dr. Hayes decided to take Ethan to the warehouse housing NASA's secret archives. However, this journey would not be easy for Ethan. Every step was risky, as entering these archives could not only provide information, but also endanger his life. But Ethan had already decided. Once he had begun this path, he would risk everything to uncover the truth. One night, Dr. Hayes and Ethan successfully sneaked into the back door of an old facility. The moment they stepped into NASA's dark archives, Ethan's body trembled with a mixture of fear and excitement. At that moment, he felt as though he was facing his entire past and taking a big step towards solving the secret hidden on the moon's surface. Inside, there were massive file shelves filled with documents that had been hidden for years. Dr. Hayes pulled out an old file and handed it to Ethan, saying, "This file contains the most hidden data from Apollo 11 during that time. Everything your grandfather wrote in his notebook is in this file as well." Ethan took the file and examined it carefully. On the first page, there were many reports about Apollo 11's secret discoveries. However, Ethan experienced his real shock on the following pages. The reports revealed that the Apollo 11 astronauts had not only studied the moon's rocks and soil, but had also encountered conscious beings. These beings were said to be linked to the shapes and structures they had seen in certain regions of the moon's surface. NASA had determined that this information should not be shared with the public. Dr. Hayes explained to Ethan that the reason for keeping these data secret was that these discoveries were an unacceptable truth for humanity. The moon was not seen as a field for scientific exploration, but rather as a hidden space containing the remnants of an ancient civilization. Ethan's heart began to race. What he saw and read aligned perfectly with everything Michael had written in his notebook. On the moon, there were structures bearing the marks of ancient civilizations, and NASA had concealed these structures, hiding them rather than studying them. Everything was starting to come together. Michael had realized that what he saw on the moon was not ordinary, and keeping this information hidden had cost him his life. Ethan felt a deep darkness within. For now, he had not only uncovered the secrets behind his grandfather's death, but had also learned the greatest truth in world history. The moon was not a space meant to be discovered by humanity. On the contrary, knowing what existed there might be dangerous for mankind. NASA had kept this truth hidden because it was unacceptable for the public. However, Ethan had another question. What would the consequences be if he revealed these secrets? He knew that if he published this information, he could put not only himself but also his loved ones in danger. But one thing was certain. The dark secret on the moon was too great to die with his grandfather's death. Since the moment Ethan began investigating his grandfather's death, the unease inside him had been growing. No matter how close he got to discovering the shadowy figures on the moon and the secrets NASA had hidden, each new step was bringing him closer to a darker truth. His grandfather's notebook and the secret documents were revealing the unknowns about the moon, but exposing them to the world could jeopardize not only his own life but possibly the lives of all humanity. At this point, Ethan was torn between two choices: stay silent and try to forget what he had learned, or reveal the truth and pay the price for everything. After his grandfather's death, Ethan couldn't cope with the chaos inside him. Various questions plagued his mind. Why is learning this so dangerous? Why is NASA so determined to keep everything secret? He could never find the answer to these questions. But one thing was certain. There was something behind his grandfather's death. Ethan had to face this truth. One evening, Ethan decided to spend the night alone at home, as his mind tried to make a connection between his grandfather's notebook and NASA's secret documents. The fear and tension he felt were intensifying. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. He saw an envelope slide under the door. The envelope carried an old NASA emblem and had no name or note on it. Ethan's heart began to race. As he took the envelope, his hands started to sweat, and he opened it deliberately. Inside the envelope were just two words: "Don't speak." Ethan immediately grasped the meaning of these words. From what he had read in his grandfather's notebook, he was certain that NASA was tracking those who uncovered this information, but this new threat showed that everything was much more serious. His eyes drifted to the last lines in the notebook. Those lines read, "If you speak of this, you will pay the price." This was also an explanation for why Michael had lost his life. NASA had tried every possible way to prevent the truth from coming out, and now they wanted to silence Ethan in the same way. That night, Ethan slept uneasily. In his mind were the echoes of his grandfather's death and the secrets on the moon. Despite trying to gather his courage, the weight of the threats and the secret documents was heavy on his subconscious. The next morning, the threatening message with the old NASA emblem had weakened the courage inside him. But there was one thing. Ethan found the strength to resist these threats. Pursuing the truth was his and his grandfather's right. Ethan had to make a decision. He decided to reveal the truth to the public. This would require him to take a great risk, but in the end, he had made up his mind. He would announce the secrets of the moon to the world. To take action, he needed to choose the right platform. He had been thinking about it for several days and realized that by starting a YouTube channel, he could draw people's attention. YouTube was the most effective way to reach large audiences, make his voice heard, and deliver a truly important message. He decided to share everything: the information from his grandfather's notebook, NASA's hidden files, everything in detailed form. Ethan opened his channel and began uploading his first video. At first, it reached only a few viewers, but over time, it became a series of videos that drew attention and gained popularity. The people who subscribed to the channel were stunned by the information Ethan shared. This video series, which revealed the hidden structures on the moon, the shadowy figures, and the truth that NASA had concealed, quickly reached millions of people. Ethan's statements caused a huge stir within a short period. Many scientists and researchers began to listen to what Ethan had to say, while some approached him with skepticism. However, as the interest in Ethan grew, so did the threats against him. Instead of questioning what he said, some of the viewers believed him and began conducting more research to learn the truth. But Ethan's life was becoming increasingly dangerous. One day, a few weeks after his video was published, Ethan's account was suddenly deleted. This shocked him. But what was even more terrifying were the observations around his house. One morning, Ethan saw several unknown figures walking outside his window in the shadows. In fear, as he looked outside, he realized that these figures were just silhouettes. One night, another envelope was left at Ethan's door. The envelope was different from the first. Inside was just a single piece of paper. The writing on the paper was connected to what Ethan had seen before. Don't speak. The second threat was even more direct than the first. Ethan's heart began to race. With each passing minute, each second, a new threat loomed. He no longer had the option to run or stay silent. He had shared the truth, but he would pay a great price for it. In the end, both the envelopes and the warnings carried a message. This was not just a personal threat. It was about revealing the greatest secret in world history, and in return, there was no guarantee of Ethan's safety. One question remained. In Ethan's mind, would his grandfather's fate be the same as his own? And would the shadowy figures on the moon remain a great mystery, still unanswered?